Seek advice, seek mentors, seek to learn from those who are better than you. The early friends that you build within this business stay friends for a long time, and they go different directions that become helpful and symbiotic as time goes on.
Steve, I was just with Eddie Bayers, and of course your name came up with incredible respect and admiration. It's just wonderful to hear that as a session guitarist, you've been doing this, producing here in Nashville. It's amazing how the energy of the music industry in Nashville is really interesting. And as I come by here to interview many of the musicians, I can find out why, because each one of you is just magic in what you have dedicated yourself for the music industry. Tell me where it began. Where did music enter your life?
My interest in music started very young, before I really understood what it was all about, but I grew up as the youngest of three boys, and my mother spoke of recollections of me as a toddler walking around in the yard strumming on a stick and singing Hound Dog. My family was in that area, and I grew up in that area. There were a lot of opportunities to play music. I played in grade school bands and elementary school, and I played in high school with all kinds of bands. And my parents knew some folks who were older who played in hillbilly country bands around the area. So I had an opportunity to play all different kinds of music with all different ages of people. Loved every minute of it. And in that area where I grew up was an interesting kind of hotbed of music in the 60s. Dan Fogelberg was from Peoria, Gary Richrath from REO Speedwagon, Jonathan Cain, Journey, the list goes on and on. It was a large sampling of people who later went on to be either artists or writers or producers or even record executives. David Kirschenbaum, who was at RCA for many years, was passed through Peoria at one point. So there was a recording studio literally built in a cornfield outside of Peoria, and we all had an opportunity to go there and learn about recording from young ages. One of these older gentlemen that I played music with, decided that he wanted to make a record, and I was 14 at the time, so we split a session, and one side was his song and the other side was me playing a little instrumental. And so I had my first exposure to a real recording studio at a very young age.
Remember what that song was?
Yeah, his song was called Lights Out, and mine was called Alone in a Dream.
Alone in a Dream. Fantastic.
So in any event, I had grown up, as I said, I listened to the radio a lot. I had two older brothers. My dad was a real hillbilly bluegrass guy, so I was exposed to the music of Bill Monroe and the Louvin Brothers and real traditional country music. My older brothers, of course, brought in rock and roll. I grew up through the folk I was too early to really be involved in it, but the folk music era, and I listened to everything. And probably one of my first biggest influences was Buddy Holly. If Buddy Holly had not come along, I don't know if I would have been as passionate about music. And this was even before his tragic death too soon. Buddy Holly invented the cool thing, with the Stratocaster and the glasses. As far as I'm concerned, Buddy Holly and the Crickets is the line in the sand that invented the template for the four-piece rock and roll band.
Absolutely.
But I also listened to like Hank Garland's guitar parts on early Elvis RCA records. Loved listening to Scotty Moore, loved Chet, loved listening to The Ventures, Noki, who we recently lost. Anything that was out there that I could listen to, and so from a young age I just figured, that's cool, that's the guy I want to be. So as an older person now, I realize what an unusual thing that is.
What a tremendous advantage that was.
It was a passion early on, and it was just there.
So you wanted to hear all these different musicians, and the fact of playing with older musicians and younger musicians really is a great balance.
It was a great balance because it exposed me to so many varieties of music.
Yeah, exactly. So at that point now, where did you start to become more professional, where you started getting paid to play?
I started getting paid to play when I was 13, 14. There was no shortage of beer joints. Peoria was a factory town, and there was a beer joint on every corner.
So bands were playing.
Yeah, so bands were playing. Live music was very healthy in those days. You'd play a Friday or Saturday night for $15, 3 hours, and just keep working your way up the ladder. But I've been a working musician since I was 14 years old. As a youngster playing in joints. My mother and father never missed, I really can't recall them ever missing a night of not being there with me to keep an eye on things and to support me and to be there.
Beautiful.
I could make a beer last all night long, but it wasn't like they said, here, take off and go jump into this adult situation.
Yeah.
They supported and they watched and encouraged.
That is fantastic to have that kind of support. And they stayed with that support. That support then allowed you to really see this as a profession then. This is what you wanted to do.
When you're young, you do things because you don't realize you're not supposed to be able to do it. There's a huge advantage in youth where you charge as hard as you can at it. And it never occurred to me when I moved here, I was 19, that was spring of 1972. It never occurred to me that I would ever go back. And my parents and my whole family were loving enough and supportive enough and believed in me enough as a musician and as a young person to let me do it. You know, they let me get out of the nest and go.
What made the move to Nashville?
I had made some friends in Nashville over the years because of my reputation as a guitar player around the mid-state area of Peoria and central Illinois, and I would always get calls to come in and play when somebody needed a guitar player for a live gig, and then we'd keep making these little regional records down there at Golden Voice Recording Studio, and in those days you could take a regional record and go out and make some noise in radio. I played on a record that was connected to another great guitar player here in Nashville, Fred Carter Jr. Fred played that terrific guitar intro on The Boxer, among other wonderful things for Simon and Garfunkel. But anyway, this record made some noise, and I had made enough friends, and finally my first mentor here in Nashville was a fellow named Bob Millsap. Bob had been a DJ in Peoria, was relocated to Nashville, was working as a songwriter, a music publisher, and kind of a general, lots of whatever came along type of guy, producing a few things, writing a few things, that sort of thing. I was offered a job by a country artist named Nat Stuckey. Not a household name anymore, but at the time he had had hit records, and he came through, and I was that substitute guitar player that filled in for a weekend of dates with him, and he offered me a job. And I think he said, if you want to go on the road, I'll give you $175 a week. So I called my mentor friend Bob down here, and I said, Bob, Nat Stuckey's going to give me $175 a week. And there was silence on the other end of the phone, and he said, that sounds like a lot of money, doesn't it? I said, well, yeah, it does. And he said, well, how would you like to be able to earn that in a day? And I thought, well, that would be really nice. I would like that a lot. Bob brought me to Nashville. I moved here on June 5th, 1972, and he had a session lined up for me at 6 o'clock that same day, which is, again, unheard of for most folks in the world. But I came to town to play sessions. That's what I did, and I've been a working musician for a long time.
The times have changed, absolutely.
Yes.
But what it was years ago, the relationships, the people that you met, those relationships and the power of that networking still works today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The power of making those friends. Musicians here never hired managers or agents or anybody to represent them. This is a relatively small town, or it was at least when I came here, and I hope it'll always stay that kind of natural degree of civility that everyone has toward each other.
Right.
Personal relationships and word of mouth is what got me going. Plus, I showed up on time. I treated every situation with the same degree of respect and professionalism. And when I strayed off the line, I had good mentors who would haul me over to the corner and say, don't do that.
Yeah.
Now go back and sit down and do what you do really well.
Yeah.
They did not have to let me in the club, but they did. And this includes the people that became my friends from the time I moved here, people like Harold Bradley, Bob Moore, Buddy Harmon, the list goes on and on, Jerry Kennedy. These were all people who were considerably older than me and constituted a lot of the original Nashville A-team. These were the guys that created the music business here.
Right.
They were all good to me. They opened the door and they let me in at a time when The door really did say closed session, no admittance. So they let me in. But the friends that I made of my own age and my own group of colleagues at that time went on to become songwriters or record producers or managers or engineers or executives, booking agents, artists, you name it. So we all maybe took slightly different paths, but within the same trajectory of wanting to be professionals and remain in the music industry and do this. So the early friends that you build within this business stay friends for a long time, and they go different directions that become helpful and symbiotic as time goes on.
So at this time, was there anyone in particular that you were listening to musically or on guitar that you were honing in on?
Once you get into the studio, you listen to radio as much as you can, but the schedules are so crazy and hectic that there's not a lot of time for recreational listening other than
Working.
in a car and working with other players. But my list of influences is a mile long. You borrow a little here and you learn a little something there, and you try to think, well, that's a great tone, or that's a cool approach to this kind of a song. And then you dig in and you say, well, what was he playing? Was that a 335? Was that a Gretsch? Was that a Telecaster? Was it whatever? You look into what was going on. And so it becomes something of a research project as much as a matter of just admiration or influence. The influence comes in a different kind of way than when you're originally sitting down and you listen to Joe Bonamassa and you go, God, that's incredible. How's he doing that? Yeah. Well, you know, I wonder the same thing. I still do wonder. Yeah. Even after all these years, I go, what is he doing? How's he doing that? It just becomes a slightly different deal when you're doing it as a profession.
Interesting. So the sessions are happening, you're playing. Are you doing any traveling at all? Or are you staying basically in Nashville?
A little bit of travel. I was busy in Nashville, but mostly I was busy in the beginning doing some master recordings for records. We did a lot of demos, which are songwriter demonstration recordings. So you work for the publisher and the songwriter. That's another huge networking opportunity that unfortunately doesn't exist in the same form that it did in those days. Also jingles. We did a huge amount of jingles. And so there were a lot of things going on, but there was a great gig that I got called to do in the fall of 1972, and that was to go to work playing guitar for Lynn Anderson, who at the time was coming off of a huge hit pop country record called Rose Garden. And it was considered to be one of the 3 best traveling kind of jobs in Nashville. So I went to work with Lynn, and it was a remarkable experience inasmuch as I've never spent a night on a bus, for example. We flew everywhere. She had great gigs. They were, the first gig, one of the first things I did with her was Madison Square Garden. And, you know, I'm a wide-eyed kid looking around going, wow, these buildings are really, really tall. And this business is wonderful. I love it. I worked with Lynn for several years, and then the session work got to where it was heavier and heavier, and I played on a couple of hit records by that time. And so the phone started ringing more, and I left that. I didn't come here to be a traveling musician or a live musician, live player. It's just I fell in love with the studio and the environment and the workshop nature. And that's what I wanted to do, and that's where I always tried to concentrate my efforts.
Well, how was it like booking these? Because, I mean, with the amount of sessions and jingles that you were doing, how did you organize all this here? What were your business skills like?
I tend to be a left brain, right brain person. So, I mean, I always fancied myself to have pretty good common sense, and I think that's a reflection of my upbringing and my roots. We didn't even use answering services or call services in Nashville. A lot of the LA and New York guys did. We would buy a device called a Codaphone and hook it up on our phone and make sure that the union had our phone numbers on record so that when someone wanted to call, they'd call and leave a message, and you'd check your Codaphone at a break or a lunch break or something and return the call, carry your book with you, and write in the session. And it was pretty simple. And some years we did, a lot of years that we did 600 plus dates a year. Everybody was always searching for the golden week. A golden week would be the 20 session week where you do 4 a day for 5 days and then collapse on Saturday. And
And then started up again.
It started up again on Monday. But like I said, when you're young, you do stuff you don't realize you're not supposed to be able to do, and we kind of took it for granted. The business part of it was take care of your money. I had good mentors who said this may not last very long. It's hard to tell. So be careful, invest wisely, be nice, show up on time. Give everybody your best stuff. Don't hold it back. Treat everybody as if they're going to be the next big thing.
Yeah.
The other thing I learned early on that I think is so important for young persons coming into this business is I learned the importance of psychology. I think the psychology of this business, this music business, or the business of music, psychology is probably as important, maybe some days even more important than your musical skills. When you walk into a studio, into any room, anywhere, one of the early things that I was taught to do is read the room, because everybody in that room has to get something out of this experience.
Yeah.
Right? The producer's looking for a hit record, the artist is looking for a hit record, but that's not, it goes deeper than that. Everybody there's got their own personal goal. At some point it all converges into, let's make a great record.
Right.
Let's have the hit record. But there's usually subtext to all of that. So the idea of learning how to read that and then give people what it is they think they want is super important.
Beautiful. How do you think you learned that? How did you become aware of being able to have that skill? Because that really is a big part of success.
It's an enormous part of success, and I'm sure that counts toward life. It's in any other business. It's not just our business.
Yeah.
Everybody else has something to get out of any situation. And then I was probably told that by one of my mentors, but I learned to put it into a useful application by doing, or sometimes by not doing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I learned a lot more by the mistakes I've made than the successes I've had.
Yeah. Boy, it sounds like you've had some great, great mentors. Talk a little bit about the musicians that have come before you and what you've learned from them and what you've extracted from them.
Sure. The gold standard in Nashville for me is always the Nashville A-Team, and that was originally Grady Martin, guitar, Harold Bradley on guitar, Bob Moore bass, Floyd Kramer and then Pig Robbins on keyboards, Buddy Harmon drums, Ray Edenton on acoustic guitar. Very few of these are household names, but these are the guys that defined. They were the ones that got up every day and didn't just play sessions, they cut hits every day.
Absolutely.
It was the modern day equivalent here to, or the same equivalent here in Nashville to the Wrecking Crew in LA.
What happened with Hal Blaine and that entire great group of musicians. And what happened in Nashville was powerful with these names. And these are names that I always ask the listeners, do the research. When you hear you speak a name, go and do the research and find out, because they really were the core of what moved music and set the standard here in Nashville.
Harold was the guy who taught me that you treat everybody with the same level of respect and consideration, because you never know who's going to be the next huge success. You can't predict it. If I learned one thing over the years, it's that I've come out of the studio shaking my head going, that's the worst thing I've ever played on in my life, or at least this week. And I've come out shaking my head going, man, if that's not a hit record, there is no future in the music business at all. Everybody's an idiot. And I've been wrong a lot. Both directions. I've been so wrong.
That is so true.
Harold was, to me, Harold is the finest example of a man who is a gentleman, a leader, musically well-schooled, had all of those skills to be able to make an artist feel comfortable, to lead other musicians, to also have the ability to leave other musicians alone to do what they do best. Every one of these people that I'm speaking of brought different sets of skills and experience to the table. And I'm back to the thing about, and they chose to share those with me, which now I'm amazed and forever grateful. Every one of these waves that came through, there was the Muscle Shoals guys that came up here, David Briggs, Norbert Putnam, Kenneth Buttry. There's always been smaller rhythm section groups of people.
Yeah.
And the utility players, Lloyd Green, steel guitar, Weldon Myrick, steel, Hal Rugg. These guys all brought something that was in some way unique and wise. They all had their own read on the wisdom and experience, and I learned something from everybody.
But you were smart enough to look to learn. You were open-minded enough to learn. That's a real important quality right there.
Absolutely. Sometimes, maybe I didn't always achieve this, but it's best to be the quietest guy in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's plenty of old sayings about you learn more from listening than you do from talking.
Interesting. What motivates you?
Well, love of music motivates me professionally. I just love it. I still listen to music now at this point in my life, but I don't listen to a lot of what's on the radio anymore. Now I have the time to go back, and I'm currently on a big kick about listening to a lot of the post-World War II jazz guitar players.
Nice.
America was a pretty wonderful place post-World War II for the arts.
Yeah.
That's when so much great, just in any form of the arts.
Yeah.
So I love that. I've also been on a kick of listening and trying to understand the great arrangers, notably the Capitol Records arrangers in the 40s and 50s. And I love to listen to how they wrote and try to analyze their styles. Everybody had a slightly different angle on how to write for the music of that day.
Yeah.
A good example of that is Gordon Jenkins. And if you listen to Frank Sinatra, it was a very good year.
Fantastic.
It's not an arrangement.
Yeah.
It's a score.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a score to the lyrics, which is a movie of a man's life.
yeah. In closing, what would you say to this next generation that are young musicians that want to go out and play, compose, write? What would you say to them that could give them the direction for them to follow their dream?
Stay hungry and stay humble. Listen to everything with an open mind. Give it a shot. Not everything is going to be appealing, but make yourself appreciate whatever's inside of it, because you may come away with something that you can pull out of your pocket later. Never be shy about asking a more experienced musician or arranger or artist their thoughts about things, their advice. Seek advice, seek mentors, seek to learn from those who are better than you. Be patient. It's a little like sometimes you can't reach out and catch the ball. You got to let the ball come to you, and that's really difficult especially when you're young and you can't happen too fast. You want to get it going. Spend time with the people you love. Keep a balance. Always keep a balance. Appreciate other types of art. Appreciate architecture. Read. Go to a museum. Look at paintings. Try to find out what is it that motivates this person to express themselves in an artistic way. All the while understanding that if you're going to be in the commercial music business, it's commercial music. And as I mentioned to you earlier, we're making sausage here. We really are. If you want art, go to the museum. But and that's not true. I'm speaking from the lens of a person who spent his life making commercial music.
Yeah.
And it'll be different for everybody because everyone's journey is different.
I think what's amazing is that, going back to your first recording, I don't think you're alone in any of your dreaming because people are following you with your dream. You have created an incredible momentum of great music as you continue. I thank you so much on behalf of the sessions. Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic.
My pleasure.